Okay, that worked well. Good evening and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. A little more on the electric vehicles side this week, we're happy to say, with our guest BJ Birtwell of Electrify Expo. You can see the banner behind me. That was my last attendance down at the Electrify Expo in New York, and that is happening this weekend on October 13th and 14th. So we'll have much more on that in the show ahead here. Joined by Walter Schulte of the Network Architect channel to my left, and then Eric of the News Coolum channel right below me there. So we're all present and correct. Just a quick reminder, you can check us out the next day on audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and everything that has audio. Bit of an apology for the last one, which seemed to lose some of the audio in the encoding process. I'm in the process of deleting that one and putting it back up, but we'll make sure this one goes up without any hitches. And you can also check out our schedule, who's coming up, what we've got dates, all that good stuff on the plugandplayev.com website, Coast to Coast TV show link right there. So in the comments there, let us know. We probably know our regulars right now, but anyone who wants to tell us where they are, what they're doing, and what they drive, we're all ears, and we'll do the viewer intros pretty soon here. If anyone's in Florida or in the path of the storm and former hurricane, we wish you well. It sounds like it may be a little lighter than expected, but in any case, we hope you are safe and sound and out of harm's way. So yeah, let me jump into the news that we're looking at this week, which is GM's stellar quarter and actually year 2024 is shaping up to be something of a resurgence for General Motors and their electric vehicles. We're not entirely split on this. I think some of us expected it, others didn't maybe. I certainly was in the camp of thinking the Bolt EV being retired, or at least on hiatus for a year, would make 2024 a little bit difficult, seeing as it was the bulk of GM's EV sales last year. But Cadillac Lyriq in Walter's corner, and then the Blazer EV, Chevrolet Equinox EV, Silverado EV, all coming out great guns. So I don't know, I think we've got a few different kind of thoughts on this. Eric, do you want to start us off, and I can put numbers up as you speak?
Yeah. I think maybe one of the biggest things is people got a little bit too used to disappointment and delays, right? Because I mean, the truth of the matter is, even these numbers, based on the original projections, are disappointing. I think if you were to sit Mary Barra and some of the executives from GM down, they would look at these numbers and say these fell well short of what our targets were. I think they were even targeting something like 50,000 Ultium, if I can still say that, EVs in the first half or the first quarter of the year or something like that. So we're well below what I think their aspirations were. But to me, this is all just sort of a healthy projected growth. And, you know, Walter, you put that chart together, that visual, and I think because it really sort of illustrated. So thank you, because it really sort of illustrated a point that I was trying to make and having a hard time to articulate. Is you notice when one of these EVs starts to ramp up, if you show the quarter when it first starts production, you're literally 2-digit numbers, right? But when you see how they ramp up, it goes from 2-digit to 3-digit to 4-digit very, very quickly. And so just over the course of 4 quarters right now, you go from 20 Blazer EVs to almost 8,000, right? And so even though the Silverado EV was a similar thing, it was the work truck that was being released, not the RST that's just now being released. And you kind of see that with the Sierra EV as well, where it's just starting to be released now. So I expect pretty much all of these numbers to go up and probably stabilize at, in the high 4 to low 5 digits per quarter for pretty much each one of these models. And I think, Steve, even you had mentioned that too. One of the things, this is maybe death by 1,000 cuts with the sales, but when you have a dozen different models that you're selling, you can get away with only selling 5 to 10,000 of them a quarter and still put up really good numbers compared to pretty much all the other automakers except for Tesla at this point. And then
this is it. They replaced Ford, for whatever so far this year, and most likely for the full year as we head into Q4 here, as the second largest, or best selling EV maker. But then that kind of highlights the difference. Ford gets a lot of praise, rightly so, I think, in the customer experience side of things and engaging EV drivers. But when you look at the sheer the roster, the stable that they have, it's obviously the e-Transit figures in there, but it's essentially on the consumer side, Mach-E and F-150 Lightning, great EVs in their own right. But when you've got 4, 6 coming on, to double digits EVs in that roster, like we saw on the list there, it's just going to, by sheer force, not only make the sales numbers look better, but also it's going to attract a wider audience. Especially when we talk about the Equinox EV, that's really starting to hit that like underserved parts of the market.
Yeah.
And Walter, you put the numbers together for us. Let me know if you want me to put them back up as you speak to them, but otherwise I'll leave your glowing visage on screen here.
Unnecessary. I was definitely one of the people who was believing that General Motors was going to be in a slump as a result of the stop production of the Bolt, basically until the Ultium came on, or the Bolt V2, whichever we're going to be calling it in the future. And we were just going to slowly be ramping up. But kudos to Eric. He called out that GM could produce 200,000 EVs and not even break a sweat. And basically that's what we're looking at. They've eclipsed Rivian. And as you say, moved past Ford into second place with a very large number of options to choose from. The most notable, in my opinion, not only the Lyriq holding its own and doing better in the luxury segment than would be expected, being called out on investor slide decks, but the Equinox EV, starting as Eric was saying, typically we would expect that to be a slow ramp, but the thing popped at 10,000 in the first quarter. And let's just talk about the future. We've had Marcus give a glowing review for the Silverado. We've just had Tom Malagny give a range test for the Silverado, showing over 400 miles. And the GMC Sierra EV Denali is out, but the standard GMC Sierra EV is coming as well. The lower priced Silverado is coming out. And the Ultium, or Bolt V2, is on the horizon at basically this time next year, with the lower price Equinoxes coming into dealer lots in the not too distant future as well. So this is just the start. We're talking about a very large ramp up. And the only question is there demand for EVs? And if so, they have, assumingly, the production capacity to meet that demand, and very compelling products that are at a price point which are best in class in each one of their different segments. So kudos to GM. I love it when a plan comes together.
I really wish I had the Hannibal visage meme there, but unfortunately I didn't prepare that one. Next time. If you have questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. We're all ears and certainly have plenty to talk about tonight. I think it's just a good reflection on where GM's at. I'm glad they've got here so quickly, because we definitely needed some good news in the EV sales space, having started the year on a little bit of a downer. But I think this kind of moves us on nicely, talking about the roster that GM's developed. We could touch on the Ultium side and the sunsetting of that name a little bit if you want, Eric, but then we'll take that into EV adoption and where Electrify Expo and shows that ilk are kind of fitting in with this growing number of EV drivers getting on the road.
Yeah. I mean, that was also something that came up recently with a they're dropping that Ultium branding, and unfortunately I think there's some detractors who like to focus on stuff like that, with GM in particular, and I kind of see that as almost a nothing burger. Even Walter noted this when he's looking at the Pilot Flying J, and originally it was Ultium this, Ultium that, Ultium Ready, right? And then they started switching it up to GM Energy, and that's just a more recognizable brand. And I think people also didn't really, either they didn't take the time or they didn't really look into what Ultium was initially, because those 100-ish amp hour NCMA cells, that was just like the step onto the paddock, right? That was not like, that was just one stage and one option, and they were very clear from the beginning that they wanted their Ultium platforms to be chemistry agnostic, to even be battery cell format agnostic, right? So they were looking at Ultium as sort of this overarching, system, right? This ecosystem for the battery and the powertrain and the charging. And as they slowly started peeling that back, it seems like they just didn't feel like there was a need for that branding anymore. And so they're opening up with SDI as well, right? It sounds like they're going to be using Samsung prismatic cells. We know they've been working with CATL, and they were one of the ones they and I believe it's Hyundai are one of the two automakers still working with. Is it now? I'm just gonna blank out on them. They're the lithium metal battery cell manufacturer. I think SEI, and they're also a potential candidate for supplying GM. So what we're seeing is a diversification of GM's battery supply chains, and it makes sense if they're not going to be all in with Ultium Cells LLC and LG, right? They're going to want to spread out to other brands and just basically be agnostic, probably from a battery supplier standpoint as well. So and that goes back to that point, Walter, about them being able to sell 200,000 EVs in a year. Honestly, they could probably double, quadruple that as long as they stay open to their incoming supply chains of batteries from different manufacturers. So, yeah, I think right now I'm seeing kind of the sky's the limit, and just being able to ramp up to customer demand, which unfortunately has been lower based on economic trends, just customer outlook. Just the consumer right now is just not very enthused about buying anything, it seems like. So I think it's headwinds for all the automakers, but at least we know now there are going to be options for pretty much everybody who wants an EV moving forward.
And on the topic of a wide range of options and consumer-facing, everything really, consumer-facing events certainly. Let me bring up our guest for the evening, BJ Birtwell. Hey, BJ, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Doing great. Looking forward to talking with you guys about all things electric. The conversation you've had here and that I've been able to listen into has been pretty interesting because, one of the reasons why we got to combat all of this narrative around what's happening with EVs is because of the way that analysts have put together forecasts. About 5 years ago, 10 years ago, analysts started to put together forecasts of what it was going to look like, what the adoption curve was going to look like, and how EVs were going to be adopted by the American consumer. So imagine being in that position, trying to put that forecast together, not being able to adjust, the macroeconomic conditions that would come on down on this country over the past several years. So here we talk about, having to fight this this bad news EV narrative, when really, if you look at it holistically, EV sales are doing great. It's actually gas cars that are down. If you look at 2016, when we were selling 18.5 million gas cars, and then you fast forward to the end of 2023, and you sold 11.5 million, that's a 4 million unit drop, and it doesn't look good for gas cars going forward as you start to forecast this out. So I think that there is a lot of upside to looking at the adoption curve of EVs. I think that the early adopters and the eco-conscious and sustainability-minded consumer, they've already made their way through the purchase funnel. And now we're in a brand new consumer who we have to reach more pragmatically. And the messaging from the industry, the messaging from the government administration has been all about sustainability and climate change. And that's just not going to work going forward. We have to be much more pragmatic about how we market and message these products. And I think once we do that, we're going to appeal to a much broader audience, and we're going to be on a steeper trajectory. Not that the trajectory we have right now is bad. I think the adoption of plugins and fully electric vehicles are doing great, and we really experienced that on the ground level at Electrify Expo. But I just wanted to jump into this conversation because, you know, we're on the street and we hear from tens of thousands of consumers every year about why they come to Electrify Expo and what they want to experience. And so, you know, what I hope we can tackle in this conversation somewhat is how we can stop politicizing EVs and not make this a blue or a red thing, and make this a practical decision about how to buy a car and what does buying a gas car today do for you in 3 or 4 years when you try to offload it. Like, let's talk practically about what these vehicles can provide and how easy it is to get into an EV today, as it was 3 or 4 years ago when most consumers couldn't afford an EV. And today there's an insane amount of options of cars that are now under $300, $350 a month that you can get in. So it's actually, I'm loving what I'm seeing. I certainly, you know, I think we're in an election year and things are a little foggy, more foggy than what they need to be. But, you know, once we come out of this, I think that there's a lot of upside for broader adoption. So anyways,
yeah, and
that's my take.
If I could just chime in too, one of the things that I'm seeing that's favoring the inevitability of the electric vehicle adoption continuing to increase is the solution that the EU has come up with for tariffs with Chinese vehicles. I don't know if anyone's been following that, but what I'm hearing is the solution is not tariffs because of the complexities of the politics associated with the European China also producing and backlash from the Chinese. So the solution, instead of tariffs, they're saying, well, you could sell your EVs in Europe, you just have to sell them at a higher price. Which basically means we have the production of electric vehicles down to a compelling rate, at least coming out of China, and it's only going to be a matter of time before the same thing happens elsewhere. And you're going to have comparable vehicles at lower cost, more dependable, and more convenient, and it's just going to be a slam dunk, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that I'll loosely paraphrase what Bill Ford said. I think it was in a stockholders meeting a few quarters ago, but he just basically said that, hey, look, our business planning outlives the election cycle. So, you know, these tariffs are not good rhetoric for legacy automakers that have made business decisions to produce their vehicles in China. I think that a better decision and a more stable decision for the U.S. economy would be to tailor those tariffs to Chinese manufacturers that have not entered the U.S. market yet, because you have legacy auto manufacturers that are already produced here. There are employees, large numbers of staff based in the U.S. And those manufacturers are being hit with this rhetoric, and they are having to change their business planning and their production volumes based on election year fogginess. And it's disappointing, and it's disruptive. That's the word I'm looking for. It's really disruptive. So I think that there's a better way to do this, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I don't think these tariffs are helpful for the brands and the manufacturers who are really investing into people in the U.S. And I think that there's a delineation that needs to be made between those that are and those that are currently not, and trying to balance how the tariff situation might look.
Yeah, and I just to chime in on that, that's kind of like the old issue with a lot of automakers, especially under NAFTA, preferring to build in Mexico, right? And so I think one of the things with that is you just say, hey, look, I don't really care if you build in Mexico, but you can't be undercutting American workers, like U.S. or Canadian workers, right? If the workers are getting the same sort of pay, if there's the same sort of benefits, the same sort of investment back into the community, then we can all kind of succeed together, right? And so to your point, right, we have a lot of, Steve, we talk about this all the time, Hyundai and Kia, even though they've been cut off from that $7,500 credit, you can get loopholes or whatever to get a lease or whatever to access it. They're still selling amazingly well, even though they're basically trying to fight through a tariff, and they've put all of this investment and all of this work into selling into the North American market, and they're still getting basically, they're not even competing on an even field right now with a lot of the domestic automakers. So, and to your point, Walter, about Chinese automakers coming in, honestly, I think the automaker who would get hit hardest by Chinese EVs in America is Toyota. They would get hit harder than any other automaker, in my opinion. So, and
I want to come back to Chinese EVs because that's, BJ being on the brand side, I really want to kind of pick away at what you've seen and which brands from the kind of Chinese market have been interested, if at all, in kind of starting to build relationships with events like Electrify Expo. But I do want to fulfill a promise and jump back to the comments for a section just to introduce everybody and let us know who's here. So we'll start up with Chase. This is more of a comment, but he's at Grid Connections, and I think BJ knows him well. I want to start with this one because the interview that Chase did for Grid Connections with BJ was excellent, and kind of put me on to whether BJ might be able to appear with us here. So thanks for that, Chase. And also made a good point there about the first topic, that GM were looking at 200,000 per year. Have we heard that? And it was actually, this kind of, to BJ's point, the initial production expectations for 2024 were at 200 to 300,000. So big wide kind of predictions. And that speaks to the initial, really trying to predict out and that hockey stick kind of growth expectation when we were in the boom days of 2022, when you couldn't get a car for love nor money at sticker price. Seems like a long time ago now, but those have consistently ramped down and just started to really meet the reality of the current economy, the headwinds that we faced. But again, to BJ's point, not EV sales slowing or stagnating. It's just been less, rocket ship growth than we maybe would have liked. But this is the reality setting in, that there are going to be harder markets to kind of crack, and we're starting to run up against some of those. But let me run through everybody else just to say hello, and then we can crack on to the main topic. Todd Holter, hello, thanks for joining us. We have Jay Donaldson, good evening. So we know you're on the East Coast there. Ron B, hi guys. Porsche Taycan in Atascadero, California, 98,000 miles, getting close to that big six figures. There's Chase again. Good evening at the Grid Connections podcast, listening to all of you guys on another EV road trip right now. Only around 180 miles though, so that's well within his Model 3's range. Let's see. Cecil Martin, good evening down in Cary, North Carolina. Model Y, waiting for Walter to buy him a Rimac. I think you may continue waiting for some time. Crazy Postman, used to disappointment, has actually got his Model 3 now. We've got all that, but it was a long time coming, and I think he's now after Tesla to deliver wireless charging. So that's another one that he may be waiting a while for. Scott Gosling, good evening, in a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt from Central Illinois. Leonard at 68.5 thousand miles in his, 68,500 miles in his 2021 Model 3. Nice numbers. I just passed, I think, 76,000. So we're all getting into the higher realms there. And let's see who else. I think we've got some topic suggestions here as well. Binaural Auto looking at 88,000 miles on his Rivian. 500,000 miles total EV. That is a solid number for sure. Variety of chargers, including Electrify America, Evigo, Freewire, Tesla, variety of others. Would like thoughts on Alpatronic and IONNA. We certainly have that on our list to hopefully get to, but we're going to keep cracking on here. We'll definitely come back to you. Thank you. Ultium branding was done for low IQ people on Wall Street. I guess it worked temporarily. Not a fan of that particular name, I guess. Mike Mahan's in SoCal, but is heading east. I will hopefully connect with him tomorrow and show some fall leaf peeping around the New England area. So safe travels, Mike. Let's see if I can see anybody else. Just for intros, Corey Leach, hello. Just got our second EV yesterday. Congrats. 24 model year Kia EV9 GTL is our primary, and they bought a 2024 Lightning Flash for the company truck. Excellent. Very versatile electric garage there. I just saw an EV9 drive by today. I was very jealous because we're needing more space, and I have my eyes on either a second EV or upgrading. So I missed a few here. Paul in Bakersfield, California, 2020 Bolt, welcome. And I think we're pretty close. Silence Do Good in Michigan, where they're assembled. That's the Bolt, I assume, or Silverado EV, that must be. Not that cheap there. And Ye Old Traveler, greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for bearing with me whilst I went through the introductions there. And this is, as I mentioned, primarily to talk a little bit initially, BJ, about Electrify Expo, certainly, but to let people know that Electrify Expo in New York, which I believe is the final consumer-facing one of the year. Then you have another in Industry Day down in Texas, I think, next month in November. But yeah, if you want to let people know a little bit initially just about what they can expect from the New York show, if we're in the Northeast here, and people who might be kind of considering popping along this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason why Electrify Expo came about was because I was actually a gas guy. I don't know if you know my background, but I loved gas cars and grew up building them, tweaking on them, modifying them, customizing them, making them go faster and look cooler. I felt like, hey, if you couldn't, hear it, you couldn't smell it, you'll never get me behind the wheel of it. And I had my mind made up about EVs before I even drove one. And then I drove one and I had my light switch moment. And it was at that point, as somebody who was more of a skeptic to EVs, that learned pretty quickly that actually had to have an experience in one in order to really get this technology. I leaned into my background, which was producing large live events, concerts, festivals, motorsports series. And we launched a new brand called Electrify Expo. So we started as a 3-stop tour and just 3.5 years ago, and now we're an 8-stop tour going around the country. We're in Long Island this weekend, October 12th and 13th. We were supposed to be at Citi Field, but those Mets, they just keep going deeper into the playoffs. Kudos to them. So we had to pivot from our venue at Citi Field last Saturday and move it over to Nassau Coliseum. Excited to be there. And then we head to Austin at Circuit of the Americas, which is the Formula One track in Austin. That is a consumer festival. It is consumer facing, and people not only get to try out EVs, but they get to try out EVs on the Formula One track. Very, very cool experience. And that's the whole point of these festivals, is to put them into these vehicles in immersive environments so that they can have a real meaningful connection with the vehicle. And that could be electric cars or trucks, or it could be bikes, scooters, skateboards, motorcycles, in some cases, electric watercraft. And so we take over 1 million square feet of space. Everywhere we go, we bring in the world's leading brands across the entire industry, and we give people the opportunity to see what this whole electric thing is all about. That's what we do at Electrify Expo.
It's awesome. And I did really have a great time at the 2022 show. Had a little bit of footage here, and there is a video up on the channel. That's my son and I went down to Long Island, New York, as BJ mentioned, Nassau Coliseum. We tried the EV6 for the first time, got in some Volvos, Polestars. We had the XC40 Recharge. There's a kid zone right here, which is full of go-karts and all kinds of brightly colored Volvos at the time to try out driving. And that was obviously 2 years ago. So I'm assuming, BJ, this has gotten considerably larger since then. You certainly mentioned that the number of cities and markets has expanded, but what can we expect to see from certainly New York this weekend? But as we go into the future of Electrify Expo, what are you seeing in terms of growth and new brands coming to the show?
Well, we've grown quite a bit. I mean, as we put together our schedule for next year, we're estimating we'll do about 300,000 demos. about 250,000 people across our 8-stop tour. So each event, averages right around that 25,000 person mark. Some events are larger, some are smaller. The biggest thing that we've seen change over the last year and a half is the type of consumer that's coming into the festival. In 21 and 22, we really saw, like I mentioned before at the head of this podcast, it was much more of an eco-conscious, sustainability-minded consumer. They kind of made up their mind that they wanted to go electric. They could talk shop. They could certainly talk shop around me. They were talking wattage and kilowatts per hour and ampage, and all that's gone away. And now the type of consumer that's coming in is really EV curious and skeptical, and they're coming in to check out this whole electric thing. And they don't talk in kilowatts per hour. In fact, if you talk like that with them, they just glaze over. And it's totally a conversation that's not worth having, because that's not how you talk to the average American consumer about how to fill up their vehicle. So Electrify has been this, I don't know, it's this, I don't know, a substitute, I guess you could say, to maybe some of the other shows that are out there, where we have more auto manufacturers represented at our show than most of the major auto shows now. And so auto manufacturers have kind of started to make us an anchor tour, and they work their experiential and their event strategy around Electrify Expo, and they come to the festivals to interact with this, top of funnel, middle funnel consumer who really doesn't, they're curious, but they need to know more, right? They need to experience this technology like I have, like I did back in the day, that helped me kind of make that light switch moment. So we'll have about 20 auto manufacturers participate with us in 2024. And as we go into next year, there'll be more. So there's a lot to look at, not just from the auto manufacturer side, but also on micromobility and EV charging and other industries that surround ours, like solar. And people can really kind of come in and experience this thing for themselves. Like you experience, it's a family-friendly event, right? So, it's pretty much young and middle-aged families, and it's a great time to come out and see if electric is right for you.
The only challenge I've had, my son asks me every year when we're going back, and the only challenge I've had is it moved from August that year to October now, so we're right in the middle of soccer season. So my weekends are so much more crunched than they were in August, but that's a personal thing. So I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity.
Your soccer game's on Saturday, come out on Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday. This is the only weekend when we've got a tournament.
Oh,
so
bummer.
My personal planning issues are nothing to do with your scheduling, I guess. Walter and Eric, I want to make sure I give you some space to kind of ask BJ, questions on the expo side before we move into other areas of EV adoption and consumer challenges. But about the show specifically, anything that kind of sprung to mind as we got underway there?
Many. And if I can say, I think the EV community is very fortunate to have UBJ at the helm of the Electrify Expo. What you've developed is a novel approach to introduction. Instead of a convention center that is dull and just industry insiders are going to attend, you have a very vibrant festival type of atmosphere that is almost like an Epcot type of experience of new technology that people can actually go to and experience and bring their family and have fun. And people are excited about it. And when they hear about it in town, they're like, oh, I want to put that on my schedule and go and enjoy that on the weekend. It's a great way of spending time. It's bring the kids and make a day of it. And as you say, it's not just cars, it's all kinds of things that you get to experience. And so kudos to you. I did look ahead of this at your LinkedIn, and looks like a lot of marketing experience. And as you said, festival experience and applying your craft to such a noble pursuit. I definitely give you kudos for, and we definitely are appreciative for your efforts and the tremendous success of the Electrify Expo. It's just truly stunning. I mean, this year, what do you have? Orlando, Phoenix, Long Beach, Denver, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, and then Austin. That's a pretty staggering growth curve that you've gone through, and as you say, it's such a short amount of time. So much kudos to that. As far as the Nassau Coliseum, that's a pretty large event space, and it just staggers me that we're, as an EV community, taking over such large venues. Is that a surprise to you, or have you kind of seen this on the horizon?
Well, shoot, Walter, when we started this thing, we were in a grass field in Orange County. So it surprises me a little bit for sure. But, now we're at State Farm Stadium in Phoenix, which is a Super Bowl stadium. We're at Circuit of the Americas in Austin. We've outgrown our venue in Long Beach, and now we've taken over the Port of LA. I think that the outdoor festival explanation that you gave, and I like to kind of call it, it's almost like a South by Southwest meets CES. And some people, look, we're not this, and I'd love to get to this stage, but it's kind of like the Disneyland of electric. It's, you use the word Epcot, because there's experiences everywhere. And if you were here 2 years ago, it's going to look a lot different today because, well, there's so many more manufacturers there, right? And when you start filling with more manufacturers like Tesla and Rivian and Hummer and all these other brands that were not there 2 years ago, you start to grow your footprint. And so our footprint has definitely grown, and we've needed new venues. And one of the big things that I've learned from doing this whole thing is just, right? You got to think 3, 4, 5 years down the road on your venue selections. As an event producer, you don't want to just be bouncing around from venue to venue and changing your dates, because people start to come to rely on you. It's almost like an annual fair where people know that when the state fair comes, it's on a certain weekend at a certain place. It's like, well, we want that same type of equity in a market, right? So we have to be very more intentional about how we choose venues. The other thing that's changed a lot is we have these different exhibitions and thrill zone experiences that we've created. Ford will bring in their 1,400 horsepower race car, and they'll whip people around and take people for spins. Hyundai will bring out their Ioniq N and do some crazy acceleration runs and all types of cool, almost like, stunt driving with people in the passenger seat. And then you have Volvo, who comes out and does more of like an academy of a safety academy and a feature and benefits of how their products work. And you start to build out these different experiences, which are so important to consumers. And then you just need more space. And so, yeah, we've really grown, and Nassau Coliseum is a great place for us to do that. And, really, honestly, being in Long Island, it's really the epicenter of EV registrations. Like if you were to look at a heat map of where all the EVs are bought in the state of New York, you would see that Long Island is up there. And if it's not at the top, it's very close to the top. So being here in Long Island is a great place for us to be. We're excited to be here, and we appreciate you recognizing the hard work. But man, it's just a lot of fun. Hopefully you can feel it from my conversation here. It's just, we just have the whole team producing these festivals, have a lot of fun because people are experiencing something for the first time, and you're seeing them do that collectively with thousands of people. It's just a really cool experience to be at.
I don't want to get into a load of branding stuff, but it does feel, as someone who does marketing as a day job as well, it does feel that the brand was born out of some kind of playful, wanting to be a different to the main industry there. You talk about the Ioniq 5N and being outside. Well, obviously being outside, you're already a little more bright and breezy and there's more space. I went down to the New York Auto Show at the Javits Center, had the Ioniq 5N speed run that you talk about, but it's so tiny. The experience space that you have for that with all of the other, they've got their limited booth space, they've got all kinds of other pieces to put on, including the kind of gas cars as well. So you've got that eating into your space. And as fun as it was to be in an Ioniq 5N, I was thinking, what if this was at Nassau Coliseum? What if the speed run was in this big wide open lot where you've got plenty of space to really open it up and feel the kind of the power, in a real outside concrete lot. So that feeling of it and that part of it really seems to be different to the industry. But it sounds like there has been an intentional kind of desire to bring out that playful aspect of it, to bring out the entertainment value, to really kind of ram home the fun side of EVs. Is that? It sounds like it's been intentional from the beginning.
Well, EVs are super fun, thrilling performance, fun tech. It should be a fun festival. It shouldn't feel like it's stuffed into the walls of a convention center and you got to navigate around pillars to experience a vehicle. In fact, unfortunately, those types of experiences, because they don't live up to the hype, actually do the opposite of driving EV adoption. And we've had many people come to Electrify Expo before and say, hey, yeah, we've experienced this vehicle at such and such auto show, and We didn't know that this car was capable of this, and it was this much fun to drive because the experience that they had there was so ho hum that it was just underwhelming. Like we build this excitement up about EVs, but if we don't deliver on it through an experience, then we're just telling people that it doesn't live up to the hype. And then they share that with their social circles. And then now we have that to overcome. So I think it's really important that events like Electrify Expo are here and thriving, because it's really giving people a real world opportunity to experience what these vehicles can do.
Yeah, BG, I had a question. Do you track the demographics in terms of, do you know how many people who come to the Electrify Expo aren't currently EV owners? Like, do you have those metrics, or do you know, like, is it like roughly 50-50? Because I'm sure a lot of us as EV owners want to go just because, like you said, it's such an exciting and fun event. But in terms of the people who are EV curious, right? Like, do you know, like, roughly how many?
70 to 80% of our consumer have never had an experience in an EV. So that's a whopping number. And that number has so there's been more EVs on the road since we've started. So now what we're starting to see, because when you buy a ticket to Electrify Expo, there's a survey that you have to answer before you can get your ticket. And so we're asking questions like, do you own an EV? Why are you coming to Electrify Expo? Is it to experience an EV, an e-bike? We ask them if they're in market to purchase an EV. Like, we have all this data. And so we know over the years how that data has changed. So what we're seeing is that I'm using this phrase loosely. It's probably the wrong word choice, but we've kind of burned through that first wave of consumer who were really kind of all in on EVs. Like, you didn't have to sell them on EVs. Right. They were just all in on it because it was either a climate decision or something else, right? Which was certainly, that wasn't me. Like, the byproduct of me going electric is great, because I am having a more beneficial environmental impact for years to come. But that's not my reason. That wasn't my purpose. In fact, that wasn't even in my consideration of why I purchased an EV, sadly. So now, and I think that I kind of represent where a lot of consumers are today. Like, the media has done a really good job of typecasting the EV buyer as a left-leaning, sustainability-minded tree hugger.
Granola eating.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Bring them all out. Exactly. And so that's made it, like, that has so politicized our market that it's actually made it harder to drive broader EV adoption, because now you're actually signaling, like, this should never be the case, but you're actually signaling, or you're led to think that you're signaling by going EV. And look, buying an EV or going diesel or choosing gas, like, at the end of the day, you're moving yourself from one place to the next. It's just a different type of fuel. Like, the metal around it is basically the same. So I think what we're seeing today now is more EV skeptics and more EV curious people who are fighting through that and who are more willing. But it's still so politicized that it's tough, and we gotta, I think, as an industry and from a messaging standpoint, really move away from that in order to try to drive this broader EV adoption that we all want. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want. We may firmly believe about an electric car's positive impact on the environment, and that's great, and there's data to back that up. But that messaging doesn't work anymore. So if we really want to drive broader EV adoption, then we got to think more practically about how to sell these vehicles. Which, one thing I really like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but you'll see it this weekend at Electrify Expo in Long Island, is Lexus. So Lexus has a big booth at our show, and their headline or their tagline on their booth is "As electric as you want to be," and that's the messaging that I think this industry needs right now. Is like, Electrify Expo, I believe in free market capitalism. I believe people should come to Electrify Expo and experience it And if it's for them, there are a ton of options for you. And if it's not for them, that's okay too. We're not here to push electric on you. We just want to give you the opportunity to experience electric and see if it's right for you. And that's what I think is really important right now.
Yeah, and with some of the EV advocacy groups that I've worked with, we did a lot of those. And this is like the National Drive Electric Week, or it expands to a month or whatnot. But we do a lot of those events, and for years, it's usually owners, and it's hard to scale, and you can't always get insurance. So you're still falling into that same trap of, like you said, like the shows where it's like a look but don't touch, or definitely don't drive sort of thing. But even still, we've always known from that experience for years and years of doing those events locally that it's butts in seats, right? That's the old thing that we always would say is butts in seats sell EVs. And so having this scale and having the ability to do these expos where people can actually get into, because that was always the struggle. And I feel like it's where the dealerships were falling short too. Because even when we could get a dealership to join us, they didn't really want people driving their car. And you could tell if someone went to the dealership, getting a salesman to walk them out to their EVs and take them on a test drive was always one of the hardest things that they could do. So this sort of event that you're doing, getting butts in seats is pretty much, that's like step one if you want to actually sell EVs, is people just need to have some firsthand experience with them, where, like you said, it's not loaded, there's no politics behind it, there's nothing else. It's just, hey, try it, see if you like it. And the other thing that I was going to say too is this does break the paradigm that unfortunately I think a lot of us EV influencers fall into, where it's almost 100% focused on charging and the infrastructure. How fast can you DC fast charge? How many miles can you go if you only stop for 15 minutes? And that's fine maybe for some EV nerds, but the truth of the matter is that that turns more people off, I think, at this point than it excites when you're talking about what does this car feel like? How do I feel when I'm in it? What is the driving experience like? That's the thing that sells EVs. So kudos to you. So,
well,
watching
thanks.
Eric destroy my topic list here of all the charging issues
Sorry,
we're looking at for the next 6 months.
Did I read ahead?
Back to consumer.
Well, I mean, if we want to destroy it further, you were just mentioning, Eric. Well, you talked about dealers. But one thing I think was important to talk about was charging and EV charging. And I've listened to a few of your other podcasts, and you guys really dig deep into that. And I think that, fully electric vehicles are not for everybody right now. And this idea of pushing fully electric vehicles on everybody is just a flat miss. Because if you're unable to charge at home, it's very likely that it's going to be tough for you to charge. I think that the automakers have done an excellent job of retooling their business strategies and rolling out EV models. I mean, it's insane. The amount of trims that we have now and the amount of vehicles that we have to choose from, it's not just a one-horse race anymore. There's a lot of opportunities, and these manufacturers, in many cases, because of mandates, have really just rethought their whole business strategies and started to roll out these amazing vehicles. Awesome. They've done their job. Awesome job. Who hasn't done their job is EV infrastructure, and where all the money is going to build out this EV infrastructure. That's not there yet, because that's not there yet, fully electric vehicles are not for everybody. And plug-in hybrids are a really good option for most. So I think that that's kind of also stalling this trajectory of where maybe we would like the EV adoption curve to be. Like I said, I'm still happy with it, but if we knew and there was satisfaction and confidence in the American consumer that they could go out and charge up in all these different places, then we would be looking at more than half the population. But we're not there. So, I just read yesterday, or is it today, that EVgo has just received a loan from the Department of Energy for $1 billion. So, and what does that look like over the next 5 years? And they're supposed to put in, I think it's 1,100 sites and 7,500 ports. Okay, well, what does that mean for 2025 and 2026? I mean, are they going to roll out all 1,100 in five years from now? Because if that's how it's going to work, it's not going to do much for us. So I think it's really, that's something that I think everybody can agree is taking too long to happen. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I think my takeaways from a cross-country trip have increasingly brought me towards the point where I'm seeing level 2 and destination charging as the next, if it wasn't already, the biggest piece of the puzzle that has not even been close to cracked yet. Whether we're talking hotel charging, destination charging, downtowns. We've spoken in the past to Nathan King from It's Electric, curbside charging option. All of these things are great and excellent solutions. There are so many names in the industry that are trying to solve that problem. For home people who can't charge at home, or that kind of 1/3 of the population that has that no driveway, no garage challenge. But it's early days. I mean, that side of the industry almost feels like 2015 again, 2016. Like it was in the early days of fast charging. So I think we get excited about fast charging because it's the big numbers, the big bucks, 350, 400 kilowatts, megawatt charging, all great stuff, but I don't think unless you're in that situation where you really do just want to replicate the gas model and just go to a place once a week and fill up your car if you're in a city, I think it's got to be all those destination charging options and more on the trip. That's what I didn't see. That's what I couldn't get charging at a hotel, going to a city, find charging. It was much, much harder to fill that bit than get across on the travel routes.
Yeah. And I still personally believe that it's more about perception at this point than it is about reality. Partially just from my own experiences with people who drive EVs versus who don't. One statistic I saw recently was something like 60% of current EV owners make more than $100,000 per year. That entire demographic is only 20% of the population, right? So you're talking about the upper 1/5 of the population who's gravitating towards EVs. Of course, they're going to go on road trips. Of course, they're going to drive across the country, make 1,000-mile road trips all the time. Where, to me, the number one barrier to EV has always been price and availability. Because for 80% of the buyers, if you can go 300 miles on a charge, the public charging infrastructure means nothing to you. I know at least a half dozen Bolt EV owners that I referred to, who literally the moment they got, and actually I'm throwing in like Nero and some of the other 250 mile EVs, once they upgraded from a 100-mile EV to those 200 to 300 mile EVs, they stopped using public charging entirely. Like they said, it just never was an issue for them again. And so I think there's a huge percentage of the population that just wants an EV that they can afford and that they can, like, you're letting people get into EVs right in the moment and test them and see them. We need EVs that people can get into because they can financially afford them. And when that happens, I think that's when we're going to see these numbers flip-flop, and internal combustion engine vehicles are just going to drop away to nothing. Public charging, you're right, needs to happen faster. But I think right now it's more perception than reality. That's been my experience. But then again, New York, Los Angeles, any of these major cities, if there's rideshare programs, and we know rideshare loves EVs, there's just not enough infrastructure. That part is true. And if you're in a city and you can't charge at home, you're pretty much, EVs, like you said, are off the table. So I do see that as a barrier. I just don't see that as the barrier, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, you guys know a lot more about this than I do. I would say, and you probably agree, perception is reality. So that's hard to overcome right now. The other thing that I hear a lot from people who are at the festival is what they hear about other people's experiences at these charging networks, and how unreliable and inconsistent they are. And that definitely stalls their confidence in wanting to go fully electric. And so they go plug in for now. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of work to do, but I wanted to nod to the automakers that I feel like have done a really good job. And it's kind of frustrating because it's a little bit of the cart before the horse, but I guess we're in good company. If my memory serves me correctly on history, the same thing happened when we moved from horse and carriage to gas cars. And people who were buying gas cars out of the horse and carriage environment, they were having their fuel delivered to them through milk truck because there wasn't any gas stations. So it's kind of like where we're at. We're
A milk truck pulled the horse.
Yeah, and
maybe we're past milk truck, but it's not too far. It's just, it's just that the government company line has been to go electric, and there's been a lot of funding to go after these charging networks and starting to set up charging infrastructure, but it's just not happening. It's not happening fast enough. So I think the faster that we can get money into the private market of entrepreneurs and companies who are really going to get the work done, I mean, that's where the money needs to go.
Yeah, and one thing I was going to say, as you brought up, necessity is the mother of invention, in my opinion. And if we have EVs driving around because automakers are producing them, they're going to get charged one way or the other. In my opinion, the holy grail of energy independence on a national level is within grasp. And I think we're going to figure it out. The governments of the world are behind the concept of not being reliant on foreign oil and having the ability to fuel private transportation and commercial transportation using electrons flying around the national grid at near the theoretical speed of light is just a more economical and in the national interest. And with that within grasp, I just don't think we're going to walk away from it and go back to gas. There's too much at stake here. And one way or another, we're going to figure it out. There's a lot of C-store operators that are throwing their hat into the DC fast charging ring as of late. And I think really that's what's going to happen, is because these store operators are seeing an existential threat from the transition to electric, and they're moving all over the place. They're putting in DC fast charges. At least that's what I've been seeing.
For sure. I think, it sets up an interesting juxtaposition there, BJ, with the side that you mentioned, the automakers really stepping up, producing compelling models, as we talked about with GM at the start of the podcast here, and having these, what started out as single digit models, and you could get a Tesla or a Bolt or a Tesla or a Leaf, and that was your kind of choice. We've got up to a point now where you can say, you've got 30, 40 more automakers and all these models on show at Electrify Expo. On the charging side and the folks who are providing the infrastructure for it, have you seen any interest in them being at the show, or is it just not really the right fit for that kind of vendor?
Very interesting question. So we can get into the business of this a little bit. Hardware, yes. Like we see the charging hardware guys there, and the installers who will come out and install this into your home. Those brands are absolutely there. I don't feel like, for whatever reason, and I'm a marketer, so this doesn't make sense to me at all, but I'm going to tell you what I see. Most of the major charging networks are not incentivized to go after consumers because their business model is built on B2B, not B2C. So we're a B2C festival. So you would think that you want to instill confidence into the consumer, especially the consumer who is shopping for an EV and who is brand new, has not made any brand loyalties to a particular charging network. Like, this is the place to be. But because these charging networks are built around and how they make money, that they're not built around people plugging in. Their business model is totally different. So they don't see that's why they're not there yet. So I think that could change in 2025, but it's always been a head scratcher for me as we've launched this festival. It's like, why aren't you guys here? Why aren't you guys interacting with this brand new consumer, and as they buy vehicles, allowing them to come in, utilize your network? But not yet. Not yet. So that's the honest answer to it. But we do get, the charging hardware companies and the installers there that are doing a great job of talking to the consumer. And the other brand that you may have heard of, who has come in really big with us to really focus on the whole EV charging educational component, has been Amazon. Amazon has looked at Electrify as an opportunity to really drive and education around EV charging and be a sage in the space. So they have the biggest display there talking about EV charging. So all the different levels are represented. We have programming there that goes on all day inside their booth, where we're bringing in EV charging experts, and they're talking about, basically EV charging 101. So as we wait for these charging networks to figure it out, the other brands are doing the job of educating them.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we mentioned at the start Ford and Power Promise, right? So there is an overlap with the automakers who are already clearly invested in Electrify Expo, and the intersection with them providing charging, even though it's through partners, and whether it's Q-Merit or the folks who are kind of linked up to GM originally for providing home charging, or now Ford with the Power Promise, they're going to have installers, they're going to have contractors that want to get business. There's something there for them to go to the show and to start doing exactly what you're talking about. I mean, Amazon is a very interesting partner and certainly someone you want to have in your corner. But, if it's the automakers bringing along folks who are going to be delivering these kind of, initiatives like Power Promise or whatever else, Hyundai Home, you start to get into, potentially energy storage at home, bi-directional charging, a lot of, the hardware side, which will come along with that education component. So, I mean, again, it's a head scratcher because maybe it's just too early in those industries yet, but there's so much potential for follow-up sales, after sales, maintenance, support, just to make those consumers aware that these are the things that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at Walter's regular network updates, and you see where these charging providers are putting their sites in. As a consumer, imagine if you went to the Electrify Expo and you saw, every Pilot Flying J now has a charger. Every Love's location, people start associating these brands with charging that's on site. Everybody loves Buc-ee's. Everybody loves all of the imagine if you had something like a Starbucks, right? Maybe if they decided to put some chargers in, there'd be all of these brand recognitions that, like you said, it's a B2C now. It's a different model than I think these charging providers are used to operating under, but it makes sense for them to be there, to just be in the consumer's eye. So,
well, thanks for the sales ideas. I appreciate it.
Group, right?
It's definitely on our mind, and we're seeing the Starbucks and the Walmarts and the other some of the C stores making these investments into would that be destination charging? So I think those are actually lower hanging fruit opportunities for us than the traditional charging networks that we would all know in terms of putting those brands in front of our consumer. I really see that. I see that happening definitely in 2025 in some regard.
And one thing I wanted to ask BJ, one thing I've been seeing just a ton of, it seems like every time I turn around, there's another news article hitting me in the face about a school district going electric with their school buses, or municipality. I know I work in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, and these buses, the city transit buses that cross through downtown, are mostly electric. Is Electrify Expo's retail or consumer shows also include heavy duty vehicles like municipal buses or school buses as things that are being showcased? Because it really seems like the uptick is there in that market.
Yeah, we'll have electric school bus representation at the Long Island event. We've had Bluebird at our events. We've had Kenworth at our events. We've had Nikola at our events. So yeah, I think that Electrify Expo does provide a platform for these guys to share their offerings with consumers and to kind of show how quickly the industry is growing into some of these medium duty and heavy duty vehicles. It's pretty exciting. And not just that, but I mean, Walter, in watercraft, we have electric boats. In some cases, when we're on the water at some of our festivals, we have electric water demos. So people can jump on an electric personal watercraft or an electric foil, in some cases, an electric boat. So yeah, people are able to kind of see the whole gamut.
What an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So I want to make sure we cover. We've talked a lot about where we are with Electrify Expo, but BJ, I'd be interested in how far you said, you project out with events. Obviously, you have to think about 18, 24 months ahead. Are you thinking 4, 5 years, all the way up through to 2030? What you might take, the expo to? I know just one call out that people would not forgive me if I didn't ask is kind of the center of the country, the Midwest and Chicago kind of area. People have been asking if that would be a market you'd move into, but just generally wherever you see the festival or the expo going, what does that look like in 4 or 5 years time?
We publish our 2025 schedule about a month from now, so that'll happen right at around our Austin event. You may very well see us in Chicago. The way that we pick markets, we do two things. One, we're really data geeks here, and two, our auto manufacturers have incredible data. So we're able to look at EV registration data and to look at it on a heat map basically on top of the country and really know where that registration data is. And then we have our own hand raiser data. So you layer those on top of each other, and you kind of know where we need to be. So our vision is not to necessarily keep the same markets year over year. We will swap in new markets and hold on to the core markets. And so you'll start to see us rotate in some of these other primary markets, and in some cases secondary markets, because these secondary markets actually have a lot of interest, but they're just super underserved. And at Electrify Expo, it's an amazing opportunity because it's not so unlike a dealership. There's nobody looking over your shoulder trying to hard sell you into a vehicle. You're experiencing it in an outdoor festival environment, no sales pressure, none of that. And you can just check everything out and figure it out if it's right for you. And then by the time that people leave the festival, they've pretty much made up their mind. And they're being spit out the bottom of the purchase funnel, and they know what direction they're going to go. And I think, our vision for Electrify Expo is to close the loop on as much as we can on retail, because we're here to move metal. We're all, we talked about, I come from a marketing and advertising background, but there's a phrase that says that advertising is made to sell more stuff to more people more often for more money. It's like, if our festival isn't moving metal, we don't exist. And so we really want to work with key retailers, especially down the road as the landscape changes on how you buy a car, to allow Electrify Expo to really close the loop on that too. So we're really excited about what's happening. Obviously, there's a lot of new models coming out in 2025 and certainly in 2026. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with China and when they enter the U.S. market. So we are having those conversations with those manufacturers, and the current political environment is definitely stalling those conversations, as you can imagine. But we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But we'll have, I think, 25 to 28 auto manufacturers represented at our shows next year, which is pretty fantastic. When in year one we had 6. So the industry's really come around with a lot of great cars to choose from, trucks to choose from.
For sure. No, I'm excited to see where it goes, because as we start to get those outside manufacturers in, the potential to really start driving down prices is what really excites me. I want $25,000-$30,000 EVs that are the Bolt times 10, and really see those on the ground for anybody who walks through your doors to be able to kind of go away and have at least 3 or 4 models that they might want to buy.
Can I make a quick comment on that? Because I know Eric brought that up before, and I don't know if we're wrapping this up pretty soon, but I wanted to just comment on that, because what I'm seeing with pricing, especially with the types of incentives and lease offers that are on these vehicles now, you cannot compare the affordability of EVs today as you could do 6 months from now, or 6 months ago. And I'm just kind of scrolling through a recent article that I read, and I'm seeing 15 or so vehicles, 20 vehicles that are, I mean, you can get into a lease on them for under $300 a month, in some cases under $200 a month. I mean, that's unlike anything I've ever seen, especially in this industry. That's never been the case, man. I mean, the messaging around EVs has always been, you know, I can't afford it, you know, and now I'm seeing vehicles under $200 a month with very little down. I mean, it's as competitive as you can get.
Right, and the used market, which we haven't even touched on, is obviously, you know, you can get some very, very good vehicles, but because they've been depreciated so heavily with incentives and various, you know, market distortion kind of, you know, rebates and grants, whatever, they, you know, getting into a Bolt these days is a $15,000 affair, and that's, you know, an EV that's only a few years old. As we start to get into the next few years, all these coming off lease, off the cheap leases, starts to really open up that used market for a lot of people who, you know, maybe were balking at either a lease because they want to own the vehicle or because they have a high mileage, you know, requirement, whatever it is. Getting into those off lease vehicles is, you know, going to get you a nice, really capable EV for very little money in the first place there.
Yeah, and I think maybe some of it's from my background too, in my experience. Because I know, and this is always something that I thought was a little bit deceptive in the auto market, is, you know, at one point in time, it's like average MSRP is $35,000 for a car. And that's the average MSRP, but average skews because we know there are more expensive vehicles. And then when you look at the actual median new car purchase price, it was usually $10,000 to $15,000 lower. So when it comes to that, there still is, I think, a limited appetite for a lot of buyers to spend even $25,000. And like you said, there is all of those incentives with EVs that do bring that money down. But I think for a lot of consumers, they're just not fully aware of how that works and just how cheaply they can get into an EV compared to a gas car. So they're going to gravitate towards the gas car that they're familiar with, that has a $22,000 MSRP or a $19,000 MSRP or whatever it is, rather than getting an EV that maybe might even cost the same brand new, but they just haven't done the math and they haven't, you know, been familiarized with the incentives enough to know that that's the path they should take.
So, BJ, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a big week ahead of you with event management. So I want to make sure people can go to www.electrifyexpo.com for the show as a whole. And as BJ said, the announcements for 2025 are pending towards the end of this year. So make sure you keep a track on whether the market that you're looking for is coming up. And then specifically on the New York Expo this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, you can pick up tickets there. I know there were family pack deals when I last looked. That may be the case right now, but I want to make sure we get all of the potential places to go and look. And then there is a YouTube channel because you're on YouTube here. So again, that fun content is, you know, extends to YouTube and everything you do with the videos. So Electrified TV on YouTube is where you're looking for there. BJ, anything else you'd like to call out specifically about the show or this weekend, or just in general a message before you head off?
Yeah, general message is just to continue to fight a lot of this anti-EV narrative that's out there and educate people like you guys are doing on this show. Super important. And as people tune in and they can hear from, you know, different people around the industry like myself and others and hear what's happening on the street, I hope that is a positive and uplifting thing to think about in light of what they might hear. So I just invite you guys out to Electrify Expo, obviously, to experience it for yourself in person and make the decision on whether or not electric is right for you.
Thanks again for coming and your insights. Great show. Really appreciate the time and the insights. And if you can get out there to New York this weekend, definitely go and do so. Thanks, BJ.
Thanks, guys.
BJ.
Thank you.
So, guys, we can stay on a little bit if you want. I know we had the topic of IONNA burning in people's back of their minds, and I can run through the comments here as well. Let me see.
Can I also just say one thing, about the political thing? Just
Always.
not telling anybody who to vote for or what to think, but I just put this in your mind for a moment. This is the first time, I think, in American history where Americans have been told what their political beliefs should be by the people that they elected. They work for you, not the other way around. Just remember that. That's my American history lesson for the day. Is, you're their boss. They don't tell you what to do.
For anyone who's questioning my citizenship, I'm not, so I can't vote. So there is no political side to me.
I did not know that.
On that subject.
Yes, however, I am legal, and I do not eat the dogs or the cats. I own them. Let me run through the comments here. There's a lot. I didn't get to some of them. Thank you so much for everybody for posting. I did briefly ask, as a straw poll, how do people prefer to shop for electric vehicles? Dealer, event, spaces like Polestar, Rivian, etc. So let me check on the answers right there. Leonard, he likes his direct sales Tesla experience, except for having to use their automated system. If I could talk to a real person quickly and get human advice from them, it would be ideal. I think Crazy Postman may have some kind of opinion on that as well, having waited about 4 or 5 months for his Tesla Model 3 performance.
It was so painful. I feel so bad for him.
Hey, good content.
I was crying on the other side of the camera.
Rumbi would want to test drive and then order from dealer online like he did with Porsche, allowed him to configure for a month. Yeah, that's a good way to sell you up to those extra Porsche options, which are ubiquitous with the brand. Buying the EV was well supported by the Ford dealer from Ye Old Traveler. Yeah, I think it's kind of one of Ford's most compelling points. Whether we talk about limited models, they certainly have the customer experience and post-sale communication very, very dialed in. Let's see. Binaural Auto somehow always shopped on Auto Trader for 7 purchased vehicles. Got the R1S with 300 miles. Exceptional. Let's see if there is anything else related to actually buying. I don't think.
Yeah, because I wonder if that's always the trade-off, though, right? Is online sales purchase easy, simple, but do you also get the customer service experience that goes with it? And I think that's, I think both of those have to be in place, right, for it to be a really good experience.
Right. Don't forget to thumbs up. Sorry, I'm all kinds of stuff here. We've got about 10 minutes to cover 20 topics, so who feels good about that? I want to make sure we hit. Walter's reviews are really good. Yes, they are. There were several comments for your updates, Walter, and I know everyone appreciates.
Thank you. Very thoughtful.
So keep an eye on those, and that one represents the 10 or 20 other comments that were that way inclined. Volvo Starbucks, I did a video on that. They are pretty good. I don't see it expanding at the moment. I think they've capped out at 50 or 60 locations. No, 50 or 60 ports, I think it was. And bunch of locations down that 1,300 mile or so stretch, but good location. I do hope Starbucks kind of leans into that and starts to find some other partners.
I heard on this really interesting YouTube news channel, I believe it's the Network Architect channel. I think you might have been talking about Mercedes and Starbucks. So
hey, there it is.
High five, right in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Check out that one. And then we should get, I mean, we've got two burning topics here. I think we definitely want to talk about IONNA and Alpitronic. And we also have Enel X-Way collapsing in on itself and leaving everybody in the lurch. That one may be so fresh that it's hard to kind of cover, but let's start with Alpitronic and IONNA. Walter, I think it's right on your doorstep, so let's go there first, if you would.
Certainly, yeah. The reports I've been getting is that the starting of construction is in the very preliminary phase, and just judging from previous builds. This could be anywhere from 3 to 6, 9 months before we're actually charging at that station. So I wouldn't hold your breath, but it is at least interesting that this is the location that they've chosen. And I was actually thinking Raleigh would really be the location that they should probably be building into, since it's so close to their headquarters. Their headquarters is in Durham. If people aren't familiar, Raleigh and Durham are very close to each other. And they're up there in Durham on the northern side, and Apex is on the southern side, but it's still very close to their headquarters. The build plot is not very big, so it's not going to be a huge station, but it's in a bit of a trendy locale, so they have that going for them. And truthfully, I just think someone who works at IONNA was driving down Apex, which is probably their hometown, one day, and they looked there like, well, that'll work. Let's just do it there. I don't know how much thought actually went into the site selection, because it doesn't really look optimal. As other people have commented, it's off the interstate. It's in a small town. Actually, not a small town. It's in a town center, which you wouldn't really think to put a large charging hub from a multi-brand DC fast charger CPO like this. But that's what they chose, and I'm sure they'll make it look spectacular. And if nothing else, it'll be great, like the Rivian one outside of Yosemite, in order to do Instagram pictures from. And I'm definitely going to go take a look at it here pretty soon. I'm not sure exactly when. I've got a camping trip with my son this weekend, but perhaps the week after or the week after that.
Yeah, and I don't know that you really need that big of a footprint if all of the stalls are charging stalls, right? I mean, even most small plots, you could fit 8 to 10 to 12 cars in at a time, and by EV charging site standards, that's pretty big. So
yeah, this one reminds me of, I think first of all, people have got a little bit nose out of joint that this isn't some kind of 80, 100 stall charging bonanza. I don't think that was the point. I think the point is to kind of start to show the experience. It doesn't sound like it's a huge town. I mean, it's going to be a lot of EV adoption in those areas, in that triangle area, I would assume, because of the money and the tech forward kind of crowd, and basically so many EV related names setting up there. If it's not there now, it's certainly potentially going to be by the time IONNA sets up.
But I also don't mind focusing on more of a city center type charging, right? Walter, you had said that some of that data, I think NREL had talked about something like 60 or 70% of the chargers that we need are in city centers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also you're doing, to me, it's a double whammy. You get away from the interstates, you really start to support smaller businesses, local economy, which is really part of what an EV transition should look like anyway, is kind of bringing everything back into the community rather than feeding it off into multinational gas companies that are building, fueling stations along interstates. So
yeah, and I could definitely speculate that there was a think session where they were coming up with locales in order to build their stations into, and abandoned gas stations would be inexpensive real estate in order to snatch up. So, they have the cleanup of the petroleum tanks, which are often a large ticket item, so it makes them unattractive to build in otherwise, and so they're likely lying around. And so maybe that will be the pattern going forward, as you say, and as they build into small towns, because they're going to have so many stations, they're going to be doing both. They're going to be doing interstate corridor and inner city or urbanized areas.
Well, and as I've been saying for a while, you referenced that Tom Malagny video driving this Silverado EV. We're going to start to see these ranges increase too. And if you're doing 800 miles in a day and you only need to make one charging stop, do you want to stop right off the freeway, or would you rather stop in a more interesting location that's more of an excursion and to your point, Steve, an experience, right? I don't really see anything wrong so far with the IONNA builds that we're seeing. So
well, and it's worth mentioning that the one in Reynoldsburg in Ohio, which didn't get a whole lot of attention because it's just site plans right now, that's going to be a full pull through for 80-85% of the site. It's 7 dispensers, so that's 14 stalls. It is pretty close. I mean, that part of Columbus, just east of Columbus and west is where they put the first Nevi site, and that's only four stalls, two dispensers. So on the wider scheme of things, I know we're dovetailing more towards 12 or 16 for Tesla now, and in the realm of kind of 6 to 8 for Electrify America, but it really has to fit the area, right? And that may be overkill for that area because they're getting so much stuff around Columbus that that could be the biggest hub that they need, really. But I don't think, as we say, that you have to have, doesn't have to be the number of dispensers that's going to lead the kind of headlines here. It should be, how is it to stop there in charge? Does it serve a nice metro audience? Can they stop and work for 20-30 minutes or more, just to have that? Maybe these types of place start to become an alternative to Starbucks, rather than you have to have the Starbucks there to make it work.
Right. That's why I think you let the site and the location and the business and the venue lead. Let it determine how big the site is, not some arbitrary decision.
So just to clear up any confusion there, the picture I put up was a render, so that isn't there, but it has broken ground, and we're starting to see the IONNA logo go up at sites like the one we've talked about in Houston. They also have Plano, Texas, Corsicana. Dallas had a couple of sites, so Texas was looking like the place to lead, but then they kind of moved up to the groundbreaking actually in North Carolina. So you got 3 states in play now, and I'm sure there's a lot more permitting out there to be discovered, just waiting to be kind of announced.
Steve, I only have one request for IONNA. I think they need a large 60 to 80 foot rotating neon sign that you can see from 2 miles off the freeway. And then that way we know how to get there.
It should waste a lot of electricity.
As much as possible.
Noses out of joint, for sure. What else can we do here? There's so much stuff that we could cover. Binaural Auto talks about prefers interesting locations, tired of 103 20-degree Walmart parking lots. I wonder, maybe we should do an entire episode defending Walmart, because they have served me well on camping trips before. But
and you also mentioned the Enel collapse, and I did want to touch that very briefly. From a DC fast charger standpoint, I know the juice box thing is unfortunate because there's a lot of consumers out there who are in a lot of hurt, and some of those have been used for level 2 stations in commercial use cases as well. So there's that. But as far as the DC fast charger implementation, their stall count was not large. It was very sparse. It was not that significant. What really hurt was Freewire. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm seeing Freewire stations dead. That was a big hit. And I think what it is, I could be wrong, but I think what it is they're unable to process billing, and they need to get the systems flashed in order to process payment from someone else, or perhaps the cellular SIM needs to be taken out and replaced or something. I'm not quite sure. But are you all seeing Freewire stations dead in your areas as well? Because it seems like everywhere I go, and also on PlugShare, the Freewires are pretty well down. And LX is unfortunate. It's getting a lot of news, but no one's really talking about this vast implementation of Freewire out there that seems to just be a bunch of metal cabinets that are unusable now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if they're working, the Freewire, they're working, but the moment they break, that's it.
I would say that I've seen our local one, which I don't use because we're around here. It doesn't. It's been fixed. It did get fixed, and I'm wondering. I've got to go back and look at the South Dakota ones, but that was me thinking. The ones along that route, some of which were quite key, those may have just gone out and not come back. But if they're starting to fix them, I did also see the former CEO talking about his next plans, and that Freewire had been sold rather than gone out of business. So
okay,
more like there's something brewing there. I mean, we just had Tritium kind of I think their sale or purchase by the Indian company XCOM, I think it was, that seemed to be going through. So I think Tritium's out of the woods. Freewire, I think, has so much, so many good partnerships and locations that they're too good to not buy if you're someone looking to get into the space. And then we have NLX, which on a, I feel for the level 2 side, that's the biggest piece. The DC fast chargers were broadly crap. There's not locations.
There's a couple dozen also in very sparse locations.
Although someone did mention West Virginia, which I think was one of them, which is obviously anything that goes
in
out.
West Virginia, 2 in Idaho are both gone.
Yeah, so I do feel for that.
It seemed like they might have been picking up used Tritium V-fill stock, maybe old charge point units that were sold back onto the free market. But my understanding is the biggest issue is with the app. I mean, I have a juice box, but I purposely got one that was not Wi-Fi, no app required, right? So that doesn't really affect me at all. The juice box still works. But, I know a lot of people were affected by the app. And so it just seems like there could be a lot of stranded assets. Maybe just need to be taken over by somebody.
So hopefully the solution isn't burning them to the ground, which seems to have happened to one of Lynard's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that set up a rather triggering moment for Crazy Postman, whose home charger has not been playing nicely with him, which is probably why the wireless charging is so high on his list. Although I don't think that guarantees it either. And yes, Todd triggers that still further because we're a supportive one. Don't think we've got much more time. I don't want to go too much longer, so we did cram in a few extra things there. I think we're happy to see IONNA making progress, and Alpatronic is a good start for them, but proof will be in the eating. So until we are using vending machines or being served by someone in our local rechargery, we will hold judgment. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope that was informative, and just a reminder that you can go to Electrify Expo New York /NY on the electrifyexpo.com website to get tickets for this weekend. And you can check out Electrify TV, as I mentioned. We have Eric Way, the News Coolum channel, and his cat, who will presumably be starring in videos pretty soon.
My cat Spot. Yeah.
Spot. The Network Architect channel, Walter's regular updates on all of the DC fast charging anywhere, anytime. And you're on Plug and Play EV, so hit a like button before you drop off for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for, I don't think we have a guest secured yet, but there's a few folks that I have feelers out for. So, and that's a good point, actually. If there's anybody that you know or that you would like us to try and talk to, drop me a line at plugandplayev@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to see if I can chase down some leads. So cheers, nerds, indeed. As Scott Wilson would put it, I think that's the perfect way to end a video. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and week. You're in Florida. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Good night.
Good night.